You have about 40,000 child miners in the Congo. It's
40,000
particularly
child
in the
miners.
yeah,
Yes.
40,000. As young as 4 years old, you'll find children that young in the mine, which is it's, horrendous. They're in dangerous conditions. Minerals that are toxic. They're digging with hands, rudimentary tools, going into tunnels that can collapse and cave in at any time. And that was the source of the suit that was brought against five tech companies in 2019 against Tesla and Microsoft and Google and Apple and Dell.
Hello, and I am absolutely delighted to welcome Maurice Carney today, who is Executive Director of Friends of the Congo, which has been fighting for dignity and the rights of people in Congo. Welcome, Maurice.
It's my pleasure. Good to be with you.
It's brilliant to speak to you. So today we've had announcement in this country about our new energy price cap. Energy prices are rising. A lot of this, or some of this, is being blamed on our race to net zero. So we're desperately trying to increase the amount of net zero renewables, and included in that is battery powered sources of energy. So you've spent 25 years fighting for Congolese people, and one of the things that you've been focusing on is the mining in the Congo for minerals that are needed for these renewable energies. So that's lithium, cobalt, nickel, and other such minerals. And just tell me, the system is, you have lots of mines in your country, and just tell me about your concerns just a little bit.
I'm sure. Well, the system you mentioned, system, and actually, the system that we're talking about is an extractive system where, the country itself, the Congo, which was designed for extraction. First, it was the rubber in the late 1800s and early 1900s to power the auto industry, the bicycle industry. And if you track the history of the Congo in the past 140 years or so, you see that with each advent of technology, that the extractivism, the extraction of the resources heightens. And as the extraction of the resources heighten, you have a commensurate destruction of the people and the land and the environment. So, for example, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, the cell phones came into play, and internet and laptops, and what was needed was coltan. Congo possesses about 60% of the world's coltan, and that had a devastating impact on the local population. And today, it's the green energy transition. It's the electric vehicle. It's the batteries for the iPads and the iPhones and the power packs for the wind turbines and the solar panels. So we see Congo's cobalt playing in a dominant role, where they produce 70% of the world's cobalt. Now, through this whole 140-year history, and Lucy, as the rest of the world benefits with devices and companies are formed, and we have ease of communication, movement, you name it, the Congolese people have remained in the same place or even worse. The environment is despoiled, the water is destroyed, the people are displaced, the health conditions of the men and the women and the children are horrendous. So what we've been organizing to do is to transform this. How is it that the Congolese people can benefit as the world moves forward? So that's a big challenge right now.
So you've talked about the amount of people in. Let's talk about the problems in detail, if you don't mind. You've estimated that possibly up to 2 million people in the Congo, may not be that many, involved in mining. One small area of focus, or big area of focus, is part of that is child labour. Obviously, we don't have good estimates, there's not good records, but just talk a little bit about child labour and the recent case. We'll move on to the other issues with women and with pollution and all the other things with the environment. But just on that that point, there is child labour. There was a recent case as well. Sometimes
Right.
the pits fall, they cave in, don't they? So just
Yes.
talk a little bit about that.
Sure, sure. And there are two types of mining that takes place, and particularly in the south of the country, where the copper and the cobalt is. And it's industrial, that's machinery, major companies. And then there's what they call artisanal or small scale mining. And the World Bank, its broad estimates say there are up to about 2 million artisanal miners in the country itself. However, they contribute to the socioeconomic well-being of population that is 10 times their numbers, right? So even though there may be 2 million or so that are involved in artisanal mining, they have a economic and social impact on 10 times that number, right? So it's a critical part of the economy, the informal economy, and where people are living in abject poverty, and their only recourse, or maybe not only recourse, but their primary recourse, is to go into the mines. And sometimes children are roped into that, mostly orphans. You have about 40,000 child miners there in the Congo. It's
40,000
particularly
child
in the
miners. That's
yeah,
it. Yes.
40,000 is the
And
number.
as
Now,
young as 7, I think I read in your report.
even younger, as young as 4 years old, you'll find children that young in the mine, which is, it's horrendous. And they're in dangerous conditions. Not only are they dealing with, you know, minerals that are toxic, right? But also they're digging with hands, rudimentary tools, going into tunnels that can collapse and cave in at any time. And that was the source of the suit that was brought against 5 tech companies by international rights advocates out of the United States. They
It
brought a
was
suit
a legal
on,
action, wasn't it? Yeah.
yes, a legal lawsuit in 2019 against 5 tech companies, Tesla and Microsoft and Google and Apple and Dell. And it was in the courts for a number of years. And it was this in 2024, in March 2024, that the District Court of Appeals ruled in favor of the companies and against the children and their case. Now, it's important to note the court stated that the plaintiff had standing. They had standing. It was a legitimate case that was brought
The
against
case was
these
about, was
companies.
it about death?
It was about death. It was about injury. Basically, the essence of the case was that that was brought by attorney Terry Collingsworth, was that these companies were sourcing minerals that was tainted by child labor. And what the court said, well, they're buyers. They weren't in a venture, right, with the companies that were extracting the minerals out of the Congo. So that's what the case fell on. However, interestingly enough, Tesla is in a venture with a company in the Congo called Glencore. But because Tesla entered into that uh, contract, into that venture with Glencore after the case had been filed, then that couldn't, was anachronistic. It couldn't be brought in, as evidence for the case. So it's a legitimate case to be made, as the courts acknowledge, and it's something that the attorneys are certainly going to be looking at again. Now, the thing is that they're trying to get some kind of recompense, some kind of acknowledgement that for those at the bottom of the electric vehicle supply chain, for those at the bottom of the green energy supply chain, where there's no value being added. So that as you go up the chain, they stay stuck there without any value. Everyone else benefits, and they're left, with low wages. In the Congo itself, of the 110 million people, 70 million or so live on less than $2.15 a day, according to the World Bank.
Yes.
So here it is that you're sitting on top of what economists say it's about $24 trillion worth of natural wealth, right? But yet you're making less than $2.15 a day. So there's this imbalance that needs to be rectified.
Rectified, yeah.
That needs to be addressed, not only in terms of wages, but in terms of a whole host of other factors as well. But the wages are certainly an indicator of the inequality that exists in the entire system.
I did read in one of your reports the labourers are earning as little as $2 a day. But one of the things I wanted to really grasp on, people could claim that their batteries and their computers and their phones are from clean sources of clean mining sources. Is that something that companies can claim, that people can claim? Why is that a problem to actually try and to source your batteries or your materials in a more ethical way?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. You're there in the UK, right? And you're familiar with the singer Dua Lipa, I believe is her name.
Yes.
Dua Lipa. Yeah, she
Singer.
interviewed Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, and she asked him that question. Folks are saying that your phones, and you source minerals from the Congo, but your phones are tainted with child labor. And he said unequivocally that they have a tight supply chain, and they can say that there's no child labor in it. But the New York State University, they have their Sloan School of Business. They did a study in 2023 where they documented in this study that you can't tell, because the industrial mining that I talked about and the artisanal mining, they all mix together before they leave the country. So
it's a murky supply chain. You've got small scale and industrial. You don't know where it's coming from.
You don't know. You cannot make that claim because of the nature of how the minerals are mixed before it even leaves the country. And so that was what was articulated. In fact, the study went on to say, Lucy, that those in the artisanal mining sector, the small scale mining sector, right, they account for about 20 to 30% of the cobalt produced in the world. And that would make them the second largest producers of cobalt in the world, right? So here it is that if you're a big company like Apple, you're saying, well, the second largest producers of cobalt in the world don't have anything to do with the cobalt that we get, right? So it's a huge sector when we talk about production. Because Congo produces, as I said, 70% of the world's cobalt. That means that if you were to add up all of the countries in the entire world that produce cobalt, they don't equal what Congo produces. To the point where even those who dig up the mineral by their hands and rudimentary tools are the second largest producers of the mineral in the world.
Yeah. So it's right?
A huge, according to this study by New York State University.
Now there has
Sloan
been
School of Business.
Yes, really interesting. There's been other studies, haven't there, that we've talked about, and one of them is about mothers, about women and mothers to be, and there's been some work looking at congenital malformations in children, in unborn babies, because of the toxic fumes. Could you just tell me a little bit about the evidence for that and what's going on?
Both, Lancelet, publication, Lancelet, right?
Lancet,
along with Rights and Accountability Development, and the local, right there in the UK, local organization called AfriWatch. They've produced a number of studies over the years that look at both the artisanal mining, where you're in direct contact with a toxic material, and the industrial mining. Because when you have the industrial mining, what happens is you have the dust that comes up from the mines, and then it gets into the air, and people inhale that. So you have cases, increased cases of asthma, for example. It gets into the water, so it affects food security because you're no longer able to fish, and it gets on the vegetation, which prevents people from farming. So when you talk about food, when you talk about nutrition, it's a devastating impact on the local population. And then the studies say that men who are involved in mining, when they have children, they come out malformed. Now, it also goes on to say that the women in the Congo have in the mining areas have the highest metallic content in their bodies in the entire world, right? So it's well documented the negative health impact on the local community, with children
Yes.
being born, with cleft lips and mouths, and
Yes.
the malformed. It's just and you're talking about people who are making $2.15 on average a day. So they're not able to mobilize the resources to deal with the effects of children that are coming out malformed and handicapped in one fashion or the other. So the health impacts, the food, vegetation, the environment, all impacted in a negative fashion. And if you look, we were just in the mining area this summer, and if you look, Lucy, you see miles and miles, as far as you can see, of trucks just driving out of the mining area in a place called Kolwezi, right? They drive out and they go down through southern Africa, out through South Africa and the Durban port there that goes into the global market, or they may go through Namibia, through Walvis Bay to the global market. And what we're talking about is something that is vital to the entire planet. And I'll give you an example of why I say that. The United States government, the European Union, the Group of Seven Nations, the G7, they all rallied around an initiative called the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, right? Where they're investing billions of dollars to get access to what they call critical minerals or transitional minerals that would power their green energy transition,
revolution,
right?
Yep.
And what they say is that they're going to add value locally in these global South countries, and the Congo is a testing ground for that. The largest initiative on their part thus far in a place called what they call the Lobito Corridor. Lobito Corridor is named after the Lobito port in Angola. And it's a rail line that's been in existence since the Portuguese, really, but that runs through Angola and then goes through the Congo into that mining heart that I was telling you about called Kolwezi. So the rail runs from Kolwezi out through Angola to the Lobito port. They're supposed to add a part to it that takes it down into Zambia, because that whole area is called the copper belt, right? And wherever you get copper, you get cobalt. So what that line does, the traditional route that I just told you about through Durban and through Walvis Bay, it cuts the time that it takes to get the minerals out, right? Where normally it would take maybe 40 days, now it'll just take 28 or 30 days. Now it'll just take 8 days to get out, right? So, and they can get the minerals out faster and at a lower cost. So it's not solely a question of the local population, right, and their conditions, but it's also a geostrategic matter that has implications for the global economy. In the United States, where I am, right, the United States government, under the Biden administration, they passed maybe about 3 laws. They have what they call the CHIPS Act, the Infrastructure Act, and the latest and the biggest one, the Inflation Reduction Act. And all of those laws have something set aside for access, like billions of dollars for access to what they call critical minerals. Even in the U.S. Congress, there are 2 bills that are presented that deals with getting access to critical minerals, primarily in competition, with the Chinese. So it's a sector, a $1 trillion sector, industry that's vital to the entire world, and it intersects with the climate crisis question. So, unfortunately, is that those at the bottom, those workers at the bottom, without whom there wouldn't be a top of the supply chain, they continue not to benefit. So we're trying to get their voices up. We even produced a film called Mikuba. We screened it at Berlinale in the film festival there last week.
Yes.
And we'll be bringing it to the UK soon, so that we can get the voices of these diggers out in an effort to start to have their voices be a part of the narrative, the discourse, and the decision-making process about how those minerals come out, and who benefits and who doesn't.
Yeah. So so the drive for net zero and mining is also an assault on human life and the planet in your planet, your land. Do you think that the laws in do you think governments and policymakers are ignoring this problem? Why is it being overlooked? And what can be done about
I
that?
wouldn't necessarily say they're ignoring it. There's the question of, it's supposed to be an alternative to fossil fuels, the burning of fossil fuels, right? And the extent to which it has a negative impact on the environment and local communities, uh, it complicates things, for those advocating for that transition. So they're trying to figure out how to actually deal with it. So I wouldn't necessarily say they're ignoring it, but it's something that has to be dealt with. Any extractive process, more times than not, will have a negative impact on the indigenous communities, local populations.
But this is
so I think it's a question of mobilizing the political will to deal with it, to see how they can mitigate the negative impact.
Yeah, but I mean, this has been going on for years. It's accelerating. These human rights abuses are going on and on and on. So if they're not being ignored, the people who are sort of in the mines, and you've been in one recently, I'd like to have a description of that, then what is going on? Why are these voices not being properly heard?
Well, I mean, really from the global south in general, and Africa in particular, you really don't, those voices are often silenced, just naturally, the course of things. And that's why we, you said we've been in mines. We went to a semi-industrial mine. That's a mine where, people do not have to dig entirely, with their hands. You have bulldozers, and they'll dig down maybe 200 feet or so, in a way that you can drive trucks up and down, a road that's, built in a circular fashion. And then you have the diggers at the bottom with their chisels and hammer, and they're hammering against the wall to extract the minerals. And then they put them in bags, all right? And then the bags are loaded onto the trucks, and then the trucks, drive to the top of the hill. It's less dangerous, but it's still dangerous nonetheless. We were in this cutout part, like a cave, just amazing, colors in blue and black and red on the wall, and we're filming it. And the foreman, asked us, well, let's go, it's time to go. And not less than 5 minutes after we left the enclave, the cave, it caved in, right? And even after that, the bulldozer on top, they were digging, and then you started having, cave-ins. So the supervisors just blew the whistle, and then all of the miners had to, to file out. So it's still very dangerous at the top of the hill. Before you go down into the mines, you have an ambulance there, to address injuries that they'll occur. So it's the thing is to get these voices out and to hear directly from them. And that's what the film Mikuba, which means cobalt, documents. And I think when more people start to hear from the miners themselves and start to get into discourse, like on your shows and others, then I think folks will start to pay more attention and bring the intellectual capital to bear on this issue to resolve it in a way to the benefit of everybody.
You've described it as a sort of 19th century framework. Do you see echoes from that colonial past, from slavery even?
Oh, it's not only echoes. The infrastructure is there. We're just at a different period. That legacy is still very, very much there. Even as I described to you, the building of the rail line, the Lobito corridor, it's built to ship things out. It's that's what Congo was designed coming out of the Berlin Conference, 1884, 1885. It was designed as an outpost for the extraction of resources, right? That design, that blueprint, has not fundamentally changed. It's still very much intact, and that's part of the challenge to disrupt, that colonial legacy in a way that the people can actually start to benefit from their own resources as opposed to being victims of their resources. Because remember, 1885 to 1908, estimated 10 million people perished as rubber was extracted from the Congo. 1996 to the present, an estimated 6 million people have perished as a result of the extraction of resources. So it hasn't fundamentally changed. And that's why we're hoping this time, as we have these technologies, as we have this awareness, as we're able to make films, we'll be able to once and for all end that cycle of exploitation and destruction to the detriment of the indigenous and local population.
And just repeat that again. You said 6 million people since
Yes, 6 million, an estimated, according to the International Rescue Committee,
perished?
they did a study looking from 1998 to 2007. 5.4 million people perished as a result of the conflict in the Congo. But it started 2 years before that, from 1996 to 1998. And according to the United Nations and Amnesty International, about 200,000. So that's just within from 1996 to 2007. And then, people have continued to perish since then. And half of those who perished are children under the age of 5. And the United Nations said it's the deadliest conflict in the world since World War II. It's unfolded in the heart of the African continent. And that's just an example, Lucy, that people don't really know about it. And when you talk about the silence, around the industry leaders, people don't really know what's happening in Africa and Congo in particular. Yeah. So that's why we exist as an organization, because we want to raise consciousness. We want to sound the alarm that fellow members of the human family are perishing in the millions. And it's almost like a tree falling in the forest, right? So we don't that's part of the raison d'etre for our organization.
We don't know the impact or how many people have suffered and have been ill because of the toxic fumes and because of the mining industry. Is that impossible to know?
We don't know any reliable numbers of.
But the pits fall, they cave in, and then there also must be cancer, links with cancer, with the fumes of radioactive material and the sulfurous fumes.
I haven't seen the studies on cancer as yet. There may be, but I haven't seen any studies on cancer yet. But without a doubt, there's a research institution in the east of the country called Pole Institute, where they did study on women and children who were extracting coltan, from the east, and the toxicity of it. And then they laid out an array of, side effects from that. But I haven't seen any data yet that, where you see that there may be a spike in cancer or tracking of cancer. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, the companies, the big companies, the net zero industries, they could just say, well, it's not our problem. We have laws. We can't help the laws that aren't being enforced in the Congo. You should have rights, workers' rights. You should have human rights, all these things. There shouldn't be child labor, but it's not our fault.
I don't know if they can really make that argument, right? That they can if they say it's not their fault, then what would follow is, okay, have you tried to do something? You're a good corporate citizen, so to speak. You're promoting these products that you say are for the benefit of humanity, right? And that's a part of your mission. You talk about the impact up and down your supply chain, right? So if you're going to market yourself in that way as advancing humanity, right, working on behalf of humanity, then I would think it would compel you to take into account all of humanity, not just those who are end users of your product, but also those who are at the bottom and where you source the product. So I would think that in order for them to make the argument that they're making to sell their product to those of us who can afford them, then they should be able to also speak to the entire supply chain, not just
And what could
not
they
just the end
do?
project.
I mean, they're not running the mines.
There's several things. There's so much that they can do. That study that I shared with you that was done by New York University, their Sloan School of Business. Microsoft was a part of it. Microsoft had gone to to be engaged to see what they can do around formalizing the mines, how they can be engaged, what they can invest in to assure that mines are safe and the workers are doing well. So there's so much more of that can be done. Listen, Apple Apple has, if I'm not mistaken, you can balance me, 55, at least about $55 billion of cash on hand. $55 billion of cash on hand, right? $1 trillion corporation. The Democratic Republic of the Congo, its gross domestic product is a little over 55 billion. And you're going to tell me you have $55 billion in cash, a company a country whose gross domestic product is a little over 55, maybe 60-something $billion for 110 million people, and you're going to say that there's nothing you can do, irrespective of the laws in the book, just human decency, right? You have $55 billion cash on hand, and and this country is a source of minerals that are vital to your bottom line. You I mean, it's kind of tough to say that there's nothing you can do, that there's no engagement that you can have. We know it is. Microsoft went there. I'm not saying that they're investing big time there, but there's some consciousness there to say, like, hey, let me go look and see what's happening. Let me see what's happening at the bottom of our supply chain, our value chain. So the companies can do a lot more in terms of they definitely have the means. I'm not just talking about financial resources. They have the networks, they have the technology, they have the intellectual capital that they can bring to bear on assuring that it's not just about the bottom line, that it's not just about the profits, but what about human beings? Those who are at the bottom of producing what we need to make our phones bling and our battery last, and for us to be able to to drive from one part of the city to the next, in an electric vehicle.
Do you think that
So there's more can be done.
This rush to net zero, which we're now trying to get to net zero by 2050, so we're on a mission. Do you think that this rush is not really doable without causing more harm? We need to look at a broader perspective of it.
If there's no intervention, if things are left as they are without any intervention, it is certainly not doable without it.
And tell me,
there has to be an intervention.
What interventions would you like? Obviously, if you remove the mining industry, then you're removing a source of income and a whole industry there. So that's not something that one could really contemplate. So what do you think should be done?
It's not a zero sum, proposition, right? And it's certainly not dichotomous. Either you have it or you don't. It's as I shared with you. I thought the model with from a corporate perspective, with Microsoft collaborating with NYU and studying and wanting to find out how they can be engaged to make things better. I think if more companies do that, you have in the film Mikuba, we have the diggers themselves, saying, making propositions as to the type of engagement that can take place. That can make things better. And that's, if you go to the diggers, they're looking for more engagement. Certainly, there's more that the countries themselves, the leadership in the countries themselves can do, and the extent to which we all work to strengthen the capacity of the indigenous organizations, of the local workers, that can go a long way in putting them in a position where they can make demands on their government, to make things better. There are resources, networks that can be brought to them, equipment, you just name it, a whole range of things that could be brought to them that companies can play a role in. I'm not saying that they have to that they become activists, but they can provide access, to resources as well that can mitigate some of the challenges. Even assuring that some of the commitments are made by the mining companies, that there are clinics built, that there is proper housing built, that there is infrastructure, for water. We work with the local organizations in a mining area, and for $12,000, we built an industrial level well that served the entire community of about 4,000 folks. We're like a nonprofit. We're not like a major corporation, and that improves the health of the community, provides access to potable water, enables them to access water so that they can be engaged in income generating activities. So there's just a range of investments that can be made, either directly or in and around the mines, that can improve the conditions.
Yeah.
And if we as a nonprofit organization that doesn't have $55 billion worth of the cash on hand, I'm surely other companies can find a way they can be creatively involved as well.
I did read that women can be more at risk from problems because they wash clothes in the water. They use the water for making
not
food.
only that, the women, what they a large part of what they do, right, is they actually wash the minerals themselves. They sift out the minerals, especially when you're talking about the lithium mines, for example. So they're in the water with the minerals. That's primarily what the collective of women miners do, and we documented that in the film in Makuba. So it's not just a question of washing the clothes, but also actually being those women that are in the mines are usually in the riverbeds washing the minerals.
And if you were to speak to, we have our Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, and governments here, would you implore them to do something, anything? What would you say? This is in the UK, but the other governments too, you would probably speak to. What would you want them to do?
Yeah, I mean, there's several things that we would implore Miliband and others to do. One is to hear from the voices of those at the bottom, to create a process where those at the very bottom can have a platform to share their concerns, to listen to what people are saying, from the bottom.
Do you think they're not aware? Do you think they're not realizing?
I don't. I think they have to have the political will to want to listen, to want to be engaged in that way. Two, you have laws in the UK, right? You have labor laws, you have human rights. You have labor laws, you have environmental laws, you have human rights laws, right? And they're at a certain standard, right? So if those standards are good for UK citizens, surely they're good for citizens of the global South. So whatever critical mineral deals that you're engaging in with whatever country, are you ensuring that the standards that you have in the UK are also being applied locally? The labor laws,
but they
consistent
can't.
with the labor
Ed
laws.
Miliband, well, they can't put labor laws in another country. How can they do that?
You said they what now?
Well, they can't. One country can't impose.
Listen, the critical minerals deal, the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, right? Which part of it, propels companies, right, or the U.S. government to be engaged, establish critical mineral deals with other countries, and as a part of doing that, they can say that these are our standards. As part of having a trade relationship with another country, they can say these are our standards.
Play these rules or no deal. Yeah.
Or no deal. They absolutely can. They can't say, well, you got to have, go in your country and make a law, but they're saying these are our standards. And the extent to which, they can hold, they hold to that can have an impact on the local population. I mean, the European Union and its gateway, EU gateway, they established a critical minerals deal with the Rwandan government, right? And they have standards in there, and they may not be enforcing those standards. The Rwandan government is getting minerals from the Congo and through violence, and there's a lot of pressure right now. We saw in the EU, the members of the EU Parliament, I think they voted overwhelmingly for the EU Commission to abide by the human rights standards that they have in their charter and their principles. So that is some, that is definitely a area in which they can, they can do better, in assuring that. I'm not saying it has to be 100%, but at the very least, have some modicum of transition in terms of the standards that you have in UK to those countries that you're establishing these deals with.
And what are you? I mean, you're appealing for this. You've got your film coming out. What other things are you doing to try and raise awareness and change the system and change this terrible situation?
As you know, change doesn't come from the top down, right? Governments are, their hands are forced, right? So educating the people, being on shows like yours, mobilizing the masses of people, the average person, and the civil society organizations, so that they can take up this, this charge, the labor formations, right? We're working with the tech and allied labor groups, and right there in the UK, they form a working group within the tech sector, because they said this is of concern to us as workers. So we're reaching out to workers in those sectors to say, listen, those workers, you guys are workers. They're workers at the bottom of the supply chain that's not doing so well. So reaching out to labor formations like the tech and allied workers of the UK, reaching out to climate justice groups, reaching out to human rights groups, reaching out to ordinary people, so that they can be informed and educated, and once informed and educated, then take action to advocate on behalf of their fellow workers, on behalf of their fellow climate justice advocates, on behalf of their fellow human beings. So that's how we believe that change can come about, from the bottom up, by engaging the people and letting them know what's happening, and letting them know that fellow members of the human family should not be living in the conditions that Congolese miners are living in the 21st century.
In our race to net zero. Well, it's been amazing, absolutely fascinating, and very disturbing to talk to you today. And hopefully the film will get a lot of attention, and hopefully we'll be able to revisit this sometime. But thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. We'll be in the UK in the first week of May. So
that's really good to know. First week of May. And where will people find it or find out about it? Just look it up.
They can go to friendsofthecongo.org to stay up to date, and we'll be announcing. It'll be right there on our homepage.
Okay.
When we're coming to the UK in May. Friends of the Congo is a good place to go.
First week of May. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for your insights.